All right, so this is the progress tracker. And here's what this is all about and what you're going to work on today. So the progress tracker will keep track of the questions that we've investigated and what we figured out to answer those questions. So we have asked a lot of investigative questions so far. So when we look at our journal, there is a list of questions that we have investigated. So we'll just quickly go through what are some of the investigative questions. Why does the temperature of the liquid in some cup systems change more than in others? What cup features seem most important for keeping a drink cold? How are the cup features that keep things cold the same or different for keeping things hot? How does a lid affect what happens to the liquid inside the cup? Where does the water on the outside of the cold cup system come from? How can we explain the effect of a lid on what happens to the liquid in the cup over time? If matter cannot enter or exit a closed system, how does a liquid in the system change temperature? How does the cup's surface affect how light warms up a liquid inside the cup? That is where we are right now. So we have answered all of these investigative questions so far. Okay, so what we're going to do with our progress tracker is you have all of these sections. Your paper is split up into two different sides. So this was going to be lesson 1, lesson 2, so forth. All right. They do not necessarily match all of the numbers here. This is actually lesson 7. So some of these did get a little bit combined, and I'll make sense of those in just a sec, okay? All right. Then what we're going to do with that is once we put what question it is on there, hopefully that will not be so blurry. Come on. All right, well, I'm just going to keep going and hopefully there it goes. All right, so what we're going to do with this is we'll write the question. And then what did we learn to answer that answered that question? What investigations did we do to answer the question? What was the evidence that we collected to answer the question? And what is new science vocabulary that we discovered? Words like evaporation, condensation, open system, closed system. Those are just a few, right? And you can include words and models in our progress trackers. So we do have a lot of models as well. All right. So here's what we do with the progress tracker. So we're going to start with lesson 1. And I know that was a while back. So you do have some resources to help you fill out these progress trackers. All right, so we'll start with question number 1. For lesson number 1, it says, why does the temperature of the liquid in some cup systems change more than in others? So we will write that here. Why does the temperature, you can shorten that to temp, of the liquid in some cup systems change more than others? All right, so this was the investigation right at the start. I did this in the classroom. I had a fancy cup versus this plastic cup, the regular cup. So we'll call this fancy cup versus regular cup. Okay? What did we figure out? All right, so this was an investigation where I put, I believe it was hot water. No, I think this was cold water. We'll have to look. It was cold water. Yeah, cold. Because the claim is that the fancy cup works better than the regular cup in keeping cold beverages cold. Okay? All right. So we put cold water in both of those cups, and then over time we measured how fast it took for each of these cups to go up in temperature, to become warmer. Okay, so what did we figure out? We figured out that the fancy cup did a better job at keeping the liquid cold. Other ways that you can say this is that it took less time for the regular cup to increase in temperature than the fancy cup. Okay, so what did the evidence show? So we're going to go into our journal and we're going to look at what was the evidence in this particular data table. So you have this data table in your journal. What is the temperature change? I don't have it in mine because each class was different. And I'll show you where you can find some information as well. But this is where you'll find the evidence for this part right here. So you can say that the data table suggests that the temperature change for the fancy cup was, whatever that number is, the temperature change for the regular cup was whatever it was. So you're just stating the data, okay, that supports what we figured out. We're basically making a claim. What's the evidence to support that, okay? Now the vocabulary. What vocabulary did we learn from this particular lesson, okay? So that's going to be kind of what you think new vocabulary for you might be. Maybe we didn't know what fancy cup means, all right? So maybe that's a new vocabulary term. It's not really a science word, but we did come up with kind of a class agreement on what fancy means, okay? So lesson 1 may not have vocabulary, and that's okay. All right, progress tracker lesson number 2 was what cup features seem most important for keeping a drink cold. So you will put lesson 2 and then whatever the question is, which is there it is, lesson 2. You also have it in the front. But what cup features seem most important for keeping a drink cold? So now that we're on lesson 2, this is going to be information that you're going to be putting here. What was the investigation that we did in lesson 2? So this was the investigation where we tested all different kinds of cups for cold water. All right, and then we came up with this data, okay? And this is when you figured out the averages for all of these cups and the cold water on the inside. So the information that you're going to get for that is lesson 2. And this is day 2, so here's some conclusions. All right, this might help you with what we figured out. All right, what did the evidence show? Your evidence comes from your data table. So you want to use that to support what you figured out. And what vocabulary did we learn in lesson 2? So again, we're just investigating in some of these lessons. We may not come to vocabulary yet. Okay, so lesson 3, you're going to keep going. Lesson 3 was hot water test. Same question. So we go back in lesson 3, maybe it's a different question. Let's look. Lesson 3, it's a little bit different. So we take a look at it. How are the cup features that keep things cold the same or different for keeping things hot? And all of the information, you want to look for the headings that say lesson 3. So I'm going to flip through. It's going to be a lot of flipping through our journal to find information. Lesson 3. Here's the evidence, the data table. We also rated them. So what did we figure out? Okay, we figured out that certain cups keep beverages warmer than other cups. Okay, these are ones where we barely felt heat, which means they kept the heat on the inside. All right. Okay. Lesson 4 was about lids. How does a lid affect what happens to the liquid in a cup? There's your evidence. What's the claim? Remember, we picked a claim in Google Classroom. So that's what we found out. Again, lesson 4. So this is kind of where vocabulary might come in. So we learned in lesson 4 that water molecules become water vapor, because that's what happens to warm liquids over time, is that the water becomes water vapor, evaporation. So that could be a vocabulary term that you might want to write for lesson 4, evaporation. And what's the definition? Some models. You can draw models. So we learned that evaporation looks like this, when water molecules escape into the air. Okay. All right. Then lesson 5. So we keep going. Then in lesson 5, again, you're just going to be kind of flipping through. Here's some models for lesson 4. This was evaporation. That's lesson 4. Lesson 5, this was, where does water on the outside of the cup come from? That's lesson 5. So that's the question you write down for lesson 5. What did we learn? We learned a couple of things. We learned that the droplets on the outside of the cold cup are water. They came from the air on the outside. Here is our evidence that when water collected on the outside of the cup, mass went up. We know it's from the outside because the water on the outside was not red, but the water on the inside was. So it had to have come from the outside. Models that we drew for that show gas molecules condensing and becoming liquid. Okay, so that's lesson 5. Now, lesson 6 is this investigative question. If matter cannot enter or exit a closed system, how does a liquid in the system change? And this investigation had everything to do with this closed container, this tightly sealed container where nothing can go in, nothing can come out. What was the result? Here's your data, your evidence. What did we find out from that? And then finally, lesson 7 is, how does a cup's surface affect how light warms up a liquid inside a cup? Okay, that's lesson 7. That is the last lesson you're going to do for your progress tracker. And what did we learn from that? What did we learn about light? Here's your data. We learned a couple things. We learned something about the clear cup, something about the foil cup. We didn't learn much about the white cup. We're not really focusing on the white cup, but we did learn some interesting things about the black cup. Okay, and all of the light that affected those 3 cups. So for each of those lessons, there are 7 of them. You're going to write the question, what investigation was done, what did we figure out from that lesson, what does our data show, what's the evidence, you have to list what the data shows, what vocabulary did we learn from that particular lesson. Okay? All right, now, other places we can find information to help us with these progress trackers are the lessons. So all of the lessons are in Google Classroom starting with Monday, September 18th. So if you don't have your notebook, you don't have your journal, I have taken pictures of all of the journals pages that we have done. And what is this? And if we keep clicking, we can see pictures. We don't want that. There we go. Nope. Nope. All right, so there's the picture of the journal for day 1 of lesson 1. And all of these lessons in Google Classroom have pictures of what we put into our journal. So even if you don't have your journal, you can go to these lessons. You can pull up the slide decks, find the information in the journal. It's all right there. All right, hope that makes sense.